Attention! Attention! Ladies and gentlemen, attention! There is a herd of killer rabbits headed this way, and we desperately need your help.
As we record this, how many days are there until Halloween, Mr. Mash?
6 more days till Halloween, Halloween, Halloween.
It's the
6
best.
more days till Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
It's the best time of the year. I was saying to you earlier today how...
Dude, your microphone keeps watching me. It's staring at me. It looks like it wants to kill me.
I was saying to you earlier about how Halloween is objectively the only good holiday.
But seriously, why is your microphone staring at me? You see the eyes?
It's almost as if it's the night of the killer microphone, which would be a ridiculous premise for a horror film.
If it was chasing you, you would say, what the fuck?
Sometimes they'll make films with an enemy or a threat or whatever that's very unusual, very strange, very difficult to take seriously. There are actually a number of films with concepts like that.
Yeah, when I came up with this topic, I had no idea that off the top of our head we could name
15 movies that would fit the category of Attack of the Killer What.
and maybe 6 movies. That'd be a nice little short podcast to do.
This episode was your idea. Usually I come up with the episode show ideas, or we collaborate. This was one that you came up with completely on your own. Last summer, which shows you how far in advance we plan things out, you bought Night of the Lepus, Day of the Triffids, and you said, hey man, we should do an episode that's about movies with really weird creatures in them. Hey, that's a pretty cool idea. At some point we decided that should be our Halloween show for this year.
Yeah.
And here we are. Let's start streaming about whatever it is.
What happened that night science made its greatest mistake? What unknown terror was born that night? What is the terrifying mutant that strikes from behind the shroud of night? That night of the Lepus. Kill one, and thousands take their place. What devil creatures growing in weight and size every day are hidden behind the eyes of horror? What can stop them?
What, JD, do you think is your favorite monster movie with a really stupid or weird threat?
Night of the Lepus.
Night of the Lepus. And what is Night of the Lepus about, my friend?
It is about giant killer bunny rabbits.
Yeah, rabbits.
Giant killer wabbits.
Wabbits. There are a few animals more associated with being cute, fluffy, soft, and harmless than the rabbit. Even that word, bunny, is adorable.
Oh yeah, it's a cool bunny.
No rabbits have these giant teeth. I'm sure they could bite the hell out of you. Rabbits are cute and soft looking.
They actually purr like cats.
I hear they make great pets. Giant rabbits that are man-eaters is just a very, very unusual thing to base a film around. Night of the Lepus from 1972 is actually based on a book called Year of the Angry Rabbit, and the book was satirical. The filmmakers apparently didn't get that memo, because Night of the Lepus plays out as if it's a serious horror film.
I have to wonder if that was done intentionally.
Come on, JD, this was 1972. Irony hadn't been invented yet. If they made a movie about giant killer bunny rabbits today, it would be like tongue-in-cheek parody. It would be funny on purpose. This movie is very, very funny, but not on purpose. If you watch the trailers for the film or look at any of the posters, none of them show rabbits. Imagine if you were a teenager in 1972 and you went to the movies and saw Night of the Lepus was playing. What the hell's a Lepus? I'll go see that. You find out it's a movie about giant killer rabbits. What would your reaction be?
Well, I love this movie, so... And I think you have an appreciation for this movie. I mean, it's a terrible movie, but I love it.
Is it terrible? This film that provides this much amusement, can it be terrible?
By that definition, no, it's not terrible.
What's the setup of Night of the Lepus? Why are the rabbits giant and killing people?
It has something to do with they're mad about all the farming and stuff like that going on.
There's a drought in the Midwest, and the rabbit population is out of control, and they're decimating the farms.
Science division
Roy Bennett is the name of the scientist.
gives these rabbits a steroid or something to try and keep them from reproducing.
But something happens.
It has an adverse reaction.
And this makes them grow to very large sizes. How large are the rabbits in this film?
They're about as tall as a guy in a rabbit suit.
Sometimes they're about the size of a man, and some other scenes they're about the size of large trucks.
Some scenes are like as big as a barn.
Yeah, it really just varies from scene to scene, but the rabbits are big. Wouldn't you say that giant killer bunnies is an inherently goofy premise?
Yeah, but to me it works, okay?
I really do not believe the makers of this movie had any irony or humor in mind, and if they did, they played it so straight.
See, that's what I'm saying. I think that it was done on purpose because it was played so straight.
There are signs that this film was supposed to be a serious horror film. In Australia, rabbits are indeed another species that was not indigenous to Australia, that was introduced and has wreaked havoc on their local ecosystem. And the movie is actually pretty gory for 1972. People are getting torn apart by the rabbits.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I gotta talk about one thing.
Okay.
The boing.
The boing?
Yeah, every time the rabbit moves, you hear the boing, boing.
I don't recall any boing.
It's in the soundtrack.
The music is very strange in this film. What is the primary way the special effects are brought to life in this film?
They probe the rabbits and make them walk on sets.
Yeah, they put normal-sized rabbits on miniature sets and have them run around in slow motion.
It was effective for what they had,
I guess. There are a couple of scenes involving humans in rabbit suits, and those moments are hysterical.
And I love how the rabbits, when they growl, sound like a lion growl.
Yes!
The
The execution in this movie, like I mentioned, is totally stone-faced. The movie is kind of a throwback to 1950s monster movies, some of which we'll be talking about today. Everybody in the movie is an older authority figure. The inherent ridiculousness of the scenario never dawns on any of the characters in the film. They're like, giant rabbits, we have to stop this. And do you remember the scene where the sheriff drives to the drive-in theater, steps out of his car, and announces through a bullhorn, a horde of giant rabbits is incoming, everybody evacuate the city.
Oh my god, yeah, I remember that.
This film, in my mind, is the platonic idea of a good, bad movie. It is played entirely serious. That's something that I think a lot of goofy monster movies miss. These things are way, way funnier when everybody's taking them completely seriously.
Yeah.
For a movie about giant killer rabbits, this movie has a really good cast.
Well, there's Janet Leigh in it.
Yeah, Janet Leigh.
It was big at the time.
Rory Calhoun plays the tough guy farmhand. DeForest Kelly, Bones McCoy from Star Trek. Yeah, he's in this. He's got a mustache. The only character in the movie I really actively hate is the little girl, the daughter, who screams throughout the entire film.
Yeah.
Really hoping somebody would throw her to the bunnies. Further proof that I think this movie was supposed to be a serious horror film. It attempts to have some serious thematic elements to it. The rabbits are symbolic of the population problem. There's been this drought, the rabbits are running wild. So that sets up this theme of limited resources. The Lepus descend on a cattle farm and eat all the cows on the farm in minutes. The rabbits are meant to be symbolic of the world population that keeps growing and keeps eating, but we're going to run out of food eventually. How do they defeat the rabbits in Night of the Lepus?
They blow them up.
Not quite.
Well, they electrocute train.
Yeah, they have the rabbits run towards an electrified train, and rabbits are electrocuted. Do you think they really killed real rabbits when they were filming some of those scenes? Yeah, probably. I don't know if the animal watchdog organizations existed yet, but you notice how that scene at the end where they're electrifying the rabbits, here's a scene in the beginning where they're corralling the normal-sized rabbits to be killed.
Yeah.
You pick up on that? But the point I'm making is, it doesn't matter how much serious subtext you add to a movie about giant killer bunnies.
It's still about giant killer bunnies.
There's no way around that. The combination of that completely stone-faced execution and a totally silly idea is what makes Night of the Lepus such a massively entertaining film.
I agree.
If you like goofball, silly horror films, this is one of the best.
Or if you just want to watch something that's very similar to a 50s B-monster movie.
Who would win in a fight between the spider from Tarantula and the rabbits from Night of the Lepus?
It's a tarantula, because he's bigger.
The day of the Triffids, when terror rained from the sky. The day of the Triffids, when the Earth orbits into a nightmare. When the solid world of everyday reality disintegrates and the whole population is driven by fear towards insanity. When destruction closes in from every side. The day of the Triffids, when law and order are overwhelmed in an avalanche of terror.
An important question for you, JD.
Okay.
What the fuck is a Triffid?
A Triffid looks like a giant thistle.
To me, it resembles a sprout of asparagus.
It's a killer plant.
I was talking about the Night of the Lepus, and what comes after the Night of the Lepus, JD?
The Day of the Triffids.
The Day of the Triffids. Based off a novel by John Wyndham, who also wrote such esteemed classics as The Midwich Cuckoos, Chalky, and Jizzle. In the UK, that book and this film are considered classics. The story, Day of the Triffids, has been adapted multiple times. 2 radio versions, I think. After this film, there was was a TV miniseries in the 80s. There was a TV miniseries just a few years ago. The British loved the Triffids, but the Triffids are obscure up here to the degree that in the opening scene to Rocky Horror Picture Show, when they sing the line, Janet Scott fought a Triffid that spits venom and kills, the audience yells back, what the fuck is a Triffid?
You know, Zach, tonight we have to yell, it's a giant man-eating thistle!
So what's the premise of Day of the Triffids?
It has something to do with a meteor.
There's a meteor shower. The whole planet will be struck with awe by this gorgeous, colorful meteor shower that night. What happens when people watch the meteor shower causes everybody to go blind. But our hero, Bill, is not affected by this because he previously suffered an injury to his face and his eyes were covered the night of the meteor shower. Something else comes with the meteors.
Triffids.
Ambulatory, venom-spitting, man-eating plants. Bill is living in this world where the majority of the population is blind and they are being beset by killer plants. Most movies would be satisfied with global plague of blindness or giant killer plant monsters.
But this movie has both.
Yeah, for some reason the makers of Day of the Triffids decided to combine those two things. And in the novel, apparently, I haven't read the book, the two events aren't even correlated at all. The Triffids are a pre-existing plant species kept in captivity, herd it on farms. This plague of blindness happens, they escape and take over. Making the Triffids a result of the meteors is a way more easy explanation.
Yeah. Because isn't there a follow-up book or something?
Somebody did write a book, but it wasn't by the same author. It was written 50 years later.
Okay, thank you.
What do you think of Triffids as a threat?
They're more menacing than anything.
They're slow.
Kind of like the slow, lumbering zombie. They're more of a creep factor than a downright scary factor.
The zombie comparison is apt. One Triffid by itself is relatively harmless. You can outrun it. They wobble around on these tiny little stumpy root-like legs. Yeah. But it's when there's a lot of them, when there's a horde of Triffids, they become a potential threat.
They're not the best monster design ever, but
they're slightly goofy. Notably, it takes the hero an entire movie to realize that the Triffids can be set on fire. Them being plants, he would have thought of that earlier. They do spit venom, but even that isn't very effective. What do you think of the whole blindness aspect of the film? That's more effective. Occasionally there's a spooky moment with the Triffids. The blindness plague is a way more effective element of the movie.
Yeah, but I'm not there to see people be blind.
There are some genuinely eerie sequences when he's driving through the streets of London and they're completely abandoned and empty. Scene in the train station, do you remember that? Where the train crashes. Pretty effective sequence, I feel.
Yeah.
But I do like one scene with the Triffids. Eventually he comes to a farmhouse in Paris. There's a colony of beautiful women there. There is a sequence where the Triffids break into the house, busting through the glass, and they make a weird noise. There's an entirely unrelated subplot in this movie, with characters that in no way interact with the rest of the cast. The people in the lighthouse?
Oh, yeah.
That's where Janet Scott comes in. Janet Scott and her husband, who's an alcoholic scientist, are in this lighthouse, and they are besieged by the Triffids.
I really got hot
when I saw Janet Scott fight a Triffid that spits poison and kill. Though Janet Scott never fights a Triffid. She just screams. Great scream. Do you remember how they defeat the Triffids at the end of the movie? Triffids have a weakness.
Water.
Yeah, salt water, specifically.
Yes.
Salt water will dissolve the Triffids. And that ending, if you couldn't have guessed, isn't in the book. They really pull it out of their ass. Oh, it's just the most common substance on the planet. That's real convenient, isn't it? Yeah, the Triffids is not bad. It's an effective 50s-style monster movie. With a lot of these things, you have to accept the goofy special effects and some of the contrived writing.
Yeah, I like this movie.
Full poster, too.
Yeah, I really like the poster.
Shrews as small as rats, perfect for scientific experiments, until they began to grow and grow into things.
They must eat 3 times their own weight in food every 24 hours, or starve.
There are 200 or 300 giant shrews out there.
Blood-curdling, horrifyingly poisonous monsters. The wildest of flesh-eaters, threatening all mankind. Your flesh will crawl with fear at their nearness.
Our next movie is from 1959. What's the movie from 1959 we're talking about, JD?
The killer women who are mean.
Close.
Killer Jews?
The Killer Jews. Oh, I'm cutting that out.
The Killer Shoes?
The Killer Shoes? How about the Killer Shrews?
Oh, yeah. The Killer Shoes. I mean, Shrews.
So what's a shrew? What is
a mean woman who won't marry anybody.
No, actually not what it literally scientifically is. No, a shrew...
It's like a type of rodent.
Yeah, it's a small mole-like animal. What would you think of the idea of making a horror movie where the attacking creatures are small, mouse-like rodents?
You'd have to make them big, first of of all.
Shrews are weird animals. In the film, they say that shrews have to eat double their body weight every day to survive, and that is true. Some shrews are indeed venomous, which is very unusual for mammals. Even then, making a movie about giant killer shrews is weird, odd, funny, goofy idea. But what do you think people really remember the killer shrews for?
Carpet dogs.
The special effects, yeah. I guess I should just give the general plot of the Killer Shrews. Captain Thomas Sherman is a sailor who's delivering supplies to a small island, and the supplies are for Dr. Craigus, who is a scientist working on shrinking humans. But as a result of his experiments, the local shrew population on the island have grown to enormous size. They're each about the size of a wolf. The sea captain, the scientist's hot daughter, and her asshole fiance, and a couple other people are trapped in this house surrounded by the Killer Shrews. What do you think of the Killer Shrews as a movie, Jade?
Elvira makes it fun.
Yeah, you saw the Elvira version of this. The movie's just a little over an hour long. Feels much, much longer. Large portions of the movie are devoted to just the characters standing around in the house, talking to each other, and that stuff is pretty slow, but once the shrews show up, I think the movie picks up a little bit more speed. So we're making a movie about giant killer mole-like creatures. What's the cheapest way to have a bunch of these creatures in our film?
Okay. You get a dog, and you cover it in rugs. And cheap rugs, too. And when I say dog, I don't mean like a Great Dane.
Regular dog.
Like a regular-sized dog. And then you cover it in shag carpeting.
That's pretty much it, yeah. Occasionally the shrews are played by these hand puppets.
They look better than carpet dogs.
They do. That's a fair criticism. It's a really silly-looking creature. And do you remember how they get off of the island?
No.
They take a bunch of steel barrels, weld them together, and they climb underneath of them. They cut little eye holes in the barrels, and they waddle off of the island inside of these barrels. And that's how they get away from the shrews. It gets funnier as it goes on. It gets more unintentionally entertaining as it goes on. And did you know they made a sequel to this film? 50 years later, sequel called Return of the Killer Shrews. Dogs and rugs have been traded out for some really subpar CGI. And Bruce Davison of X-Men and Willard fame is in the movie. And the original Killer Shrews, well, it's not really a classic. If you're a horror fan, you should probably see it, just so you can say you've seen it. And it's in the public domain. You can watch it for free anywhere.
The Creeping Terror is the story of a man-eating carpet from outer space that lands on Lake Tahoe, Nevada, and devours the entire teenage population at the high school prom.
He had only one means left to stop the monster: grenades.
If you're going to talk about Attack of the Killer What, you really have to breach these next two. The first which is The Creeping Terror. Now, have you heard of this film?
Yes.
Because I've told you about it.
Yes.
Somewhere in California, a spaceship lands. Inside are two alien creatures who are very slow-moving, mounds of flesh, and they devour anything they come upon. One escapes and goes on a rampage through the town. The title exaggerates the terror part, but creeping is accurate. The creature moves very, very slowly. The only reason it ever catches anybody is because the victims have a very bad habit of standing still and screaming while the monster eats them. Anytime the creeping terror is on screen, they play a stock sound effect of a lion roaring, which is very strange. Anytime it's swallowing people, you hear this very exaggerated swallowing noise, like a gulp, gulp, gulp noise. There are a lot of sequences of women being devoured, a lot of focus on their legs as they're being swallowed. Maybe the director had a weird kink. And the funniest scene is when the military tries to attack the creeping terror. All these soldiers are standing there. They just let the monster eat them. There's a scene where it attacks a lover's lane, and it looks like the creature is humping the cars. There was no recorded sound. They had to dub in all the sound after.
Oh, God. We're not talking about this movie anymore.
There's a scene where the creeping terror attacks a dance hall. In one part of the room, the monster's eating all these women. In another part of the same room, these guys are getting in a fist fight as if they don't even see the monster. I'm not saying the creeping terror is an easy watch. It's an endurance test, but it is fascinating in its ineptitude.
Deathbed, the bed that eats people.
Speaking of fascinating ineptitude, hey, I've got a title for you from 1979. Deathbed, the bed that eats. Now, what's this movie about, JD?
Deathbed that eats people?
Yeah. Deathbed, the bed that eats. It's pure outsider cinema. This was made totally independently. It is an utterly inexplicable journey to the other end of madness. The premise of Deathbed, the bed that eats. Centuries ago, a demon made himself corporeal so that he could sleep with a woman. To better facilitate this union, he created a bed. And after the sex, the woman died. The demon cried tears of blood that landed on the bed. The tears caused the bed to have an insatiable hunger. Centuries later, the bed sits in a basement of an old abandoned building where somehow it still manages to claim victims. This movie's value lies in its ability to make the audience shout in utter disbelief. The whole film is narrated by a man hiding behind a painting in the room where the deathbed is. The deathbed snores when there's nobody on it. There are a lot of people get on the bed and they try to fuck. The first couple bring a feast. They have some fried chicken and some wine. You may be asking, how does a bed devour people? Well, I'm glad you asked. The sheets pull back and there's his yellow digestive fluid inside of the bed. As the food falls into the bed, you hear eating sound effects, stock crunching sound effects. It even drinks a bottle of Pepto-Bismol in one scene. There are moments of absolute hilarity. The narrator details the history of the deathbed, and we have flashbacks to the turn of the century. People are having orgies on the deathbed. A priest is sitting in the bed, and yellow foam comes up. And the look on the actor's face is one of complete disillusionment. In one scene, a person is in the bed and starts being eaten by the deathbed and says, "Help, I'm being eaten." One girl lays on the bed, gets sucked in, she escapes, and the sheets come to life, wrap around her leg, and pull her back into the deathbed. One sister's brother tries to stab the bed. His hands are dissolved. The actor spends the rest of the movie skeleton hands. It's not art, but I'm not sure what else to call it. It's not for casual moviegoers. This movie could kill a normal person. It is pure weirdo cinema. There's no pacing, barely any plot, acting that can charitably be described as stagey, and music composed solely of shrieking synth noises. They interviewed the director on the DVD. He doesn't remember making the movie.
Question.
Answer.
All those actions you just laid down, was that about the movie or about the podcast?
Anyway, it's on YouTube. Watch it. It's amazing.
The stuff is a product of nature, a deadly living organism. It is addictive and destructive. It can overcome your mind and take over your body, and nothing can stop it.
Man, I could really go for some yogurt.
We don't have any yogurt, but we do have...
Yeah, you do have yogurt.
No, we've got...
Yeah,
we've
it's
got
up there in the
this
fridge.
stuff.
It's called the stuff.
Yeah, we got this stuff.
No, that stuff.
There are two types of movies about ridiculous threats. There are those that are played entirely seriously, and nobody making the film had any idea that this movie was going to be ridiculous. And then there are those that play up on the humor. And as we go further into the modern age, you'll see more of those. The stuff is positioned between those two accesses.
It's very much an 80s monster movie.
Yeah, this was from 1985. It was a movie directed by Larry Cohen, who also made It's Alive, God Told Me To, Hell Up in Harlem, Q the Winged Serpent, Return to Salem's Lot. Larry Cohen's an interesting dude.
I don't think I've seen any of these movies.
You've never seen Q the Winged Serpent? You've never seen It's Alive? Oh my god, how is that possible? Oh man, I gotta make you watch all of this. When we do 80s monster movies, we gotta watch Q the Winged Serpent, Quetzalcoatl's hanging out in the Chrysler Building, only Michael Moriarty and David Carradine can stop it.
I mean, it sounds amazing.
Oh, and Shaft, Richard Roundtree is in the movie as well. What is the stuff about?
Company is drilling. They hit a well of this white stuff that tastes a lot like really good yogurt.
For some reason, they look at it and think, I'm gonna put this in my mouth. They sell it to a food company.
And the food company calls it the stuff.
They package it and it becomes an immediate, enormous success. The ice cream companies who are losing revenue hire a private detective named Mo Rutherford. Now, why do they call him Mo, JD?
Because he's Mo Awesome?
No. When they give him money, he always asks for Mo. It turns out that the stuff is not what it appears to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's addictive.
It has mind-controlling powers.
The stuff seems to be an ambulatory creature. It has a will of its own. It can move. When people eat too much of the stuff, they become, well, zombies, I guess. They get taken over by the stuff. Do you realize what this movie is about, JD?
No.
This is a satire of the tobacco industry.
Oh.
A corporation selling a product that kills its customer, but they're making so much money that they don't stop selling the product. And luckily the product is addictive, so for every customer it kills, 2 more are hooked on it.
Yeah.
That is actually what the stuff is supposed to be about. The focus on the movie seems a little uncertain. Can't really tell if it's supposed to be a comedy or a serious horror film.
Yeah.
It works best as a comedy. We mentioned Mo, who was played by Michael Moriarty, who's a very interesting performer.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that subplot where the little boy's family, they've all become hooked on the stuff and they're trying to get him to eat the stuff?
Go kid.
There's a character named Chocolate Chip. Paul Sorvino plays an extremist militant. At the end of the movie, they go to him and they say that the stuffies is what they call the people who have become addicted to the stuff. They tell him that they're all communists. The movie's aware of how silly it is. Some scenes are definitely played for humor, but a lot of other scenes are being played for serious horror. An element, I guess you would say, of body horror in this movie. When the people get taken over by the stuff, they're these grody-looking zombies.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where the guy's mouth stretches open.
Oh, God, yeah.
The stuff comes up out of his throat. They shot a couple scenes on a gimbal. I think it was foam out of a fire extinguisher, and they had that rolling around inside of the gimbal. Odd movie, the stuff. It's definitely not effective as a horror film, and it's sort of funny, but then sometimes it isn't funny. Those commercials in the movie are great, though. You just can't get enough of the stuff.
Oh, boy.
Vicious man-eating tomatoes grow to monstrous proportions.
They made the sequel, The Return of the Killer Tomatoes. Guess what? It's a lot better. It had to be. They're back.
The girl of my dreams is a vegetable.
Title of this episode is really taken from an infamous movie, the movie that probably quantifies this whole topic in the public's mind, which is 1978's
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
And I don't know how many people have actually ever seen this movie, but a lot of people know the title, and they know the theme song.
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Oh man, you suck at this. I made you watch the original Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I own it. It's alright. It really is a one-joke movie. It's only 90 minutes long, but it feels way longer.
It feels like 3 hours long.
Yeah, there are definitely some funny jokes in it. The tomatoes make this weird grumbling noise. And there is a great one-liner of the president closed down the submarine field today because, quote, all those funny black ships just keep sinking anyway. There's a scene where somebody warns a dead body about approaching danger. It's really not that amusing. It's a musical. All the songs are bad. But they made a sequel anyway.
They made a couple sequels.
Yeah, they actually made 3 sequels and a Saturday morning cartoon show.
A Saturday morning cartoon show is actually based off of
the second film in the series, 1988's
Return of the Killer Tomatoes.
And this is, in every way, a better film than the first one. But it is the same director, John DeBello. It's obvious that when they made the sequel, they had more money and more experience, and it's overall more entertaining, but no less silly.
It's actually more silly.
So what's the premise of Return of the Killer Tomatoes?
Since you asked. John Ashton, Gomez fame.
Gomez himself.
Samuel Adams!
That's the guy.
He's the mad doctor, Dr. Gangrene. He invents these tomatoes that, at the sound of music, turn into humans with a mission.
Yeah, humans that obey his every command.
Yeah.
Now, you forgot to mention that it's been 10 years since the Tomato Wars.
That's right. There's a tomato ban.
Yeah, tomatoes are outlawed, which has caused pizzeria owners to get very creative.
Yes, like a peanut butter and jelly pizza or something.
Absolutely vile. The main character of the movie is Chad, the nephew of a character from the first movie. He has no game with the ladies until he stumbles into a female named Tara, who is Dr. Gangrene's tomato humanoid female servant.
Yes, but she has this cute little pet.
FT, the
which
fuzzy
stands
tomato.
for fuzzy tomato.
Yeah, this movie is basically a goofy teen sex comedy with no sex or nudity in it.
Yeah.
You mentioned the big-breasted girls going to the beach and taking their tops off, which is a fake trailer that opens the film.
Yes.
Maybe has an even better theme song than the Killer Tomatoes theme song.
Yes.
When those big-breasted girls go to the beach and take their tops off. We mentioned this in the Our Favorite Things episode, didn't we?
A little bit.
Who's Chad's roommate?
George fucking Clooney himself.
George Clooney in one of his earliest roles. You think he put this on his resume?
God, I hope so. Return to Horror High, sure. Don't put that shit on there.
George Clooney's character, he's preoccupied with getting laid. He's always coming up with schemes to get women interested in him. The Tara character, she has been engineered to cook clean and well-versed in all sexual techniques. She's eating plant feeder.
Yes.
Just a lot of goofiness.
Like little subtle touches of goofiness.
Yeah.
That make it funny.
And there are a lot of very silly jokes in this movie.
They run out of money halfway through the production of the movie.
So they have to start introducing product placement. Wonder if Mike Myers saw this film before he made Wayne's World. It is very similar to the gag they do in Wayne's World.
It's different, though.
One of my favorite gags in the movie, Dr. Gangrene, like all mad scientists, has his own Igor. However, his Igor is a would-be newscaster with a 1,000-watt smile who's very eager to please and upbeat. John Astin will say, "This isn't a game," and then he steps in front of a giant scoreboard. Mm-hmm. One of the best jokes in the movie. And it happens early on, too. They cut to a shot of what is obviously San Francisco. There are the trolley cars, it's on the hill, and then the caption says New York City.
Uh-huh.
Some very silly, funny jokes like that. But we gotta talk about FT, who is the real star of the film as far as I'm concerned. Stupid.
Cousin It as a tomato.
Yeah, and he falls down the stairs, making the squeaking noise. The scene we always talk about. Just tell him the scene.
Are you talking about the grenade scene?
Yeah, the scene where somebody throws a grenade.
And FT dives onto the grenade.
He sacrifices himself.
The saddest moment in a horror comedy is...
Oh my god, it's so fucking funny.
Funny, but it also makes you cry.
It doesn't. It just makes
you
you
laugh.
laugh.
It's a great scene why that was killed at all.
At the end of the movie, they say, your plush FT Fuzzy Tomato toys are available in the lobby. And disappointingly, those aren't real products, because if they were, we would own one.
We'd own two. What are we talking about?
Return of the Killer Tomatoes has the same problem as the first movie in that it's too long. 98 minutes, and these goofy gag comedies should never be longer than 80. Runs out of ideas before the end. It's definitely a hoot. It's amusing. It spawned 2 more sequels. The Killer Tomatoes Strike Back in 1990, and The Killer Tomatoes Eat Friends in 1991, in addition to the Saturday morning cartoon show, which I definitely do remember.
Yes.
In a quiet bakery, one woman is about to confront her past, an unholy curse.
The hell is that?
Well, it sure ain't the Pillsbury fucking Doughboy.
Run, as fast as you can. Something's in the oven. The Gingerdead Man.
Now, speaking of threats that you can eat, threats that you can smoke, threats that you can sleep on, all sorts of ones today. So we've mentioned Full Moon Studios. We love Full Moon Productions, right?
I like some Full Moon Productions.
Our second episode was about Charles Band's Full Moon Company. We're definitely fans.
I'm a fan of old Full Moon.
Oh yeah, the early 90s.
For sure. That late 80s, early 90s period.
Yeah, Puppet Master 1 for 5, the first 3 Subspecies movies, Shadow Zone, Demonic Toys, Doll Man. Definitely enjoy those for what they are. Very entertaining. Castle Freak is a classic. But the early 90s were a long time ago. Since the turn of the century, Charles Band and his cohorts have been tossing together tiny budgets to make ridiculously cheap, barely functioning movies with little care or effort. In these sad twilight years, the Gingerdead Man is what passes as an ongoing Full Moon franchise. What's the Gingerdead Man about? Silence.
God.
Just watched this movie like 2 hours ago, dude.
Something about there's a cat fight that results in the Gingerdead Man getting brought to life.
Okay. There's a serial killer, Millert Fiddlemeyer or something. Kills a bunch of people in a roadside diner, except for this one girl. Caught, he gets the chair. Years later, this girl opens up a bakery. The mother of the serial killer sends his ashes mixed in with a gingerbread mix to the bakery. They bake the cookie. Some blood gets spilled on it. It comes to life. It's an evil killer cookie. This movie isn't good, obviously.
It's horrible. One of the worst movies I've ever seen.
It's definitely not good. Weird thing to me is it's not the insipid screenplay, the brainless premise, or the bottom of the barrel production values that bother me the most. It's the cast. The acting in this movie is horrendously awful. The characters are really annoying.
It's very clear that they spent their whole budget on getting Gary Busey.
Yeah, we should mention that Gary Busey plays the Gingerdead Man as a living person, which comprises how many scenes? The answer to that question is 1. Gary Busey himself is in one scene. He voices the Gingerdead Man for the remainder of the film, but the Gingerdead Man doesn't talk that much. I think they got Busey for 2 days. The production values are non-existent. The whole thing is shot inside of one building.
Yeah.
And how long has Charles Band been making low-budget movies? Since the 70s. He should be better at this. This movie looks incredibly cheap.
He's gotten worse over the years, if anything.
Yes, I think he's a better hype man than a filmmaker. It looks dull. It's incredibly boring. The pacing is terrible.
But he made it sound like one of those bad movies that turns out to be so bad it's good.
That's Full Moon's entire sales plan these days. And this movie has spawned 3 sequels. Gingerdead Man 2, Passion of the Crust.
Oh, you gotta give it to him. He knows how to make a title.
Gingerdead Man 3, Saturday Night Fever. And then a crossover film with the latter-day Full Moon's other big franchise, Gingerdead Man versus Evil Bong. Now, none of these movies have Gary Busey in them, which means the star power has been reduced to 0.
In a flophouse, 3 stoners are looking for the ultimate high. What they found is something sinister. One hit, and she gives you your dreams. But in this world, you get high, you die. This summer, let's get baked.
When we actually got to meet Charles Band a couple years back, you asked him the origin of the Evil Bong series.
Yes.
And his response was,
well, my son and I were out at lunch.
Didn't he say that my son came up with the idea while high?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Here's a stupid question. What's the plot of Evil Bong? Nerd is looking for a place to stay while he's in college. Finds an apartment that is currently occupied by 2 stoners. Stoner orders a haunted bong out of the back of High Times magazine. Truth in advertising, the bong's haunted, it's evil. When people smoke from the bong, they are taken to a alternate universe, killed, and the bong absorbs their souls. Obviously, the characters are very broad. The nerd character has the pocket protectors and the tape on his glasses, and he wears the button shirts. The kind of stereotype that I can't even believe people were still doing in 2006 when this movie was made. This movie has 1 star in it, too. Tommy Chong. I will say this about Evil Bong. It is better than Gingerdead Man. And part of that is because Tommy Chong, though not a marquee name by any means, at least can make the audience crack a grin. The Evil Bong can't move. It can barely talk. It has no offensive capabilities. When people smoke from the bong, they're sent to an alternate universe, which is a strip club. It's a strip club. The strippers have monster brawls on, which are brawls with skull faces on them or whatever. Real things that Charles Band sold for his website, because nothing has to make sense when you're high. Inside the strip club are references to other Full Moon movies. The Gingerdead Man is there. Jack Attack from Demonic Toys is there. Tim Thomerson, in character as Jack Death from the Transfers movie, shows up. Bill Fondicarlo, who was the dwarf and troll and a bunch of other things. Bill Moseley shows up. Bill Moseley shows up, looks directly into the camera and says, "What am I doing here?"
I'm a real horror actor. What am I doing here?
This movie is cheap, but is admittedly less cheap than Gingerdead Man, because it has 2 sets. Excluding the crossover with Gingerdead Man, they've made 4 sequels to this movie, JD. 4, and these are the titles. King Bong, Evil Bong 3, Wrath of Bong, Evil Bong 420, and then Evil Bong High 5. I didn't see any of those.
A secret experiment has given birth to a new breed of
fear. Get ready for the violence of the lambs.
The sheep are revolting.
Thanks. Black sheep.
You know what they've got a lot of in New Zealand?
Sheep.
There are more sheep than people in New Zealand.
Well, that's just crazy.
I think it's actually bad. What are your opinions on sheep?
They're weird.
There's something woolly about them.
Yeah.
How many sheep do they have in New Zealand, JD?
I don't know. How many sheep do they have in New Zealand, Zach?
A mutt-ton.
Well, that's just sheer awful.
I want to herd you into this. So in 2006, a guy named Jonathan King made a movie called Black Sheep, a horror film about killer sheep. New Zealand has a good pedigree for gory horror comedies. This is, after all, the country that gave us Peter Jackson. Sheep are just silly-looking creatures, big fluffy coats, vacant faces, and they make this stupid noise. Making them evil killers that will attack people is a funny idea. The main character in Black Sheep has a phobia of sheep. Two things happened to him one day as a kid. His father, who was a sheep farmer, died, and his brother killed his pet sheep, skinned it, and jumped out of a barn with the skin on him. When I said that to you, your response was, that's fucked up. Years later, the older brother, Angus, has turned their sheep farm into an experimental sheep research laboratory. Some hippies get in, release a mutated, genetically enhanced weirdo sheep, which bites one sheep, and all the other sheep become infected and become killers. What happens when these infected sheep bite humans?
They turn into were-sheep. Woohoo!
This movie fuses lowbrow humor and highbrow humor. There is some satire of corporate greed, but also the hippie activists get picked on too. Early on, when the two hippies are introduced, the girl says, Experience is the female's name, and she says, I hope this won't be like the salmon farm. The other guy says, hey, those fish died free. For all of the corporate satire in this film, it's also got a sheep biting a guy's dick off.
Which is amazing.
Explosions via farts. We just spoiled the end of the movie for you.
And vegetarian hippies.
Eating rabbits and other creatures. What do you think of the whole were-sheep concept?
That's cool.
The special effects in this movie are good, I think.
They could be better, but I've seen worse.
The effects were done by Weta Workshop, who do the effects for all the Lord of the Rings movies.
Well, that's just wasn't their best.
There is some morphing and stretching.
I mean, it is really hard to make a were-sheep not look ridiculous.
The movie is intentionally ridiculous. Fantastically, a music sequence where a herd of killer sheep descends on people are gathered. It turns into a zombie movie where the sheep are pulling people's intestines out.
Yeah.
One guy gets his leg gnawed off, and then he picks up the leg and throws it at a sheep.
Choke on him!
If you like gore in your horror movies, I think you're going to like Black Sheep. It is ridiculously gory. I enjoyed it. You didn't seem super invested in it.
I was just in a hurry.
Any movie that has were-sheep and mass death via exploded flatulence can't be bad.
I agree.
Everybody! This is what our killer looks like.
Tired. We cannot turn against each other right now. That is exactly what the beavers would want.
We started this episode, we were talking about movies that were unintentionally ridiculous. They didn't set out to make a bad movie. They didn't set out to make a silly movie, but it happened anyway. And now there are films that are intentionally invoking ridiculous monsters and threats.
Right.
And a notorious one is from 2011. It's called Rubber, and it's a movie about a tire with psychic powers who can make people's heads explode. I saw this movie when it came out. I didn't really like it because it's super up its own ass. It's very meta. The tire's named Robert. It's going around and it's having an adventure. It falls in love with a woman. There are these people on the sidelines who are watching everything as it happens. Oh, well, this is the audience. There's a character in the film that poisons all the people in the audience and kills everybody. This whole stupid movie is saying, why are you watching a film that is intentionally awful? Really?
Yeah, I kind of hate it when movies make fun of the audience.
It can be done well, but this was pretentious and obnoxious. One that came out just this year is one that I think was conceived as a title first and then everything else afterwards. What's the name of the movie, JD?
Zombeavers.
Zombeavers. Would that be beavers that are zombies?
Maybe it's zombie lesbians.
You said you watched the first 5 minutes of this movie on Netflix.
Yeah, it's got something to do with beavers being zombies.
These 3 teenage girls, well, they're like college students, are going to a cabin for a vacation. Around the same time, a truck with some toxic waste on the back falls off the truck, rolls into the river where the beavers eat it. The beavers become undead monstrosities that when they bite people, the people become half human, half beaver hybrids.
So were-beavers?
Yeah.
Did I miss were-beavers?
They're kind of like were-beavers, really more like a zombie thing. And my problem with this movie is the characters are really obnoxious. Every other word is fuck. There's references to dicks and peeing. One character murders a dog. You won't like that. One of the good guys picks up a dog and uses it as bait to distract the beavers.
Why do they always kill the dog?
And like
fucking bastards.
The thing that
I swear to God, I'm gonna knock. Fucking Hollywood needs to go somewhere and quit killing dogs.
If they killed cats, it would be okay.
Yeah. A dog is nothing but helpful to people. Why kill the dog?
It's supposed to be a comedy. We'll still treat the characters' dilemmas seriously. There are all these girl characters, and one of them is cheating with the girl's boyfriend. Comes up a lot in films like this, doesn't it? It's such a stupid, hackneyed plot. These moments are treated seriously in this movie that's obviously absurd and ridiculous. There really aren't a lot of jokes in it. It really does seem to think that zombie beavers is enough. There is one funny joke. 12-year-old boy. fishing in the lake, and he's wearing a hat that says "Number One Dad." The beavers themselves aren't really used that well. The effects are okay. What are beavers famous for?
Building dams.
Building dams and chewing trees down.
Yeah.
There's one scene in this movie devoted to both of those things. Got a movie about killer beavers. You should utilize what beavers are well known for. The girls are all cute. A lot of nudity and sex in the film if you're looking for that kind of thing. But Zombeavers proves what we already know. Goofy premise and a knowing approach is not enough to build a film upon. We intentionally left out the Mangler. We'll talk about that whenever we do Stephen King as a show topic. Let's play this game real quick. What's the most ridiculous horror movie premise you can think of off the top of your head?
Sentient airplanes.
An airplane could crash into you.
And then it's done.
There are more coming to me. Some others we left off the list. Attack of the Killer Refrigerator, I think it's called. Tagline for that film, I believe, was, "These aren't cold cuts." Short film that's a parody of Night of the Living Dead. It's called Night of the Living Red. It's actually kind of cute because it's only like 2 minutes long. There's a whole fucking subgenre of killer elevator movies.
Yeah.
Absolutely bizarre, but it is so. Okay, if I was to think of a ridiculous horror film premise, killer curtains.
Okay.
Let's make it a sequel to Deathbed. Some of the digestive fluid from the deathbed has survived, and a scientist spills it on some curtains. Anytime somebody walks by the curtains, they reach out and grab the person and strangle them with, What's an animal you would say that's harmless and not intimidating in the least?
Besides a bunny rabbit?
Yeah, besides a bunny.
A flying squirrel.
Well, you know, JD, the guy who made Won It is producing a film called Squirrels. There's a concept trailer on YouTube. The tagline for the movie is, "They're after your nut."
Alright, do the...
Okay, we're done. Fuck it. This episode is over. If you want to contact the Bangers of Mash Show, you may do so at bangersinmash88@yahoo.com. That's the word bangers, letter N, word mash, number 88@yahoo.com. If you would like to find us on Facebook, you may do so. Our Facebook address is www.facebook.com/thebangersofmashow. To all our listeners, near and far, thank you for your constant support, and happy Halloween. It is the best time of year to be a horror fan. Enjoy your candy.
Have yourself a happy Halloween.
And watch out for tomatoes, and rabbits, and beds.
Attack of the killer tomatoes! Attack of the killer tomatoes! They'll beat you, bash you, squish you, mash you, chew you up for brunch, and finish you off for dinner or lunch. They're marching down the halls, they're crawling up the walls, they're gooey, gushy, squishy, mushy, rotten to the core, they're standing outside your door. Remember Herbert Farbage, while taking out his garbage, he turned around and he did see tomatoes hiding in his tree. Now he's just a memory. I know I'm going to miss her. A tomato ate my sister. Sacramento fell today. They're marching into San Jose. Tomatoes are on their way. The mayor is on vacation. The governor's fled the nation. The police have gone on strike today. The National Guard has run away. Tomatoes will have their day. Attack of the killer tomatoes. Attack of the killer tomatoes. They'll beat you, bash you, squish you, mash you, chew you up for brunch, and finish you off for dinner or lunch. Munch, munch, dinner or lunch, munch, munch, dinner or lunch.